Welcome into the left versus the right. I'm James Flippin. He's Anthony Weiner, and we've got 2 hours now to play with Anthony. So if they haven't had enough of us yet, they're going to get a lot more.
Yeah, I don't like that verb. We ain't playing. We ain't playing. Even though it's Super Bowl Sunday, we ain't playing. We should do some sports, though, since it is Super Bowl Sunday.
And there's some good sports news to get to. We're both very happy about Pete Alonso.
I'm wearing my New York Mets sweater
which is a really good-looking sweater, I have to say. And there's a lot of stuff to get into, of course, as there always is. National news, some stuff that connects to aspects of finance, international policy. Let's start there.
Well, before we do it, also, a lot of people tuning in looking for the middle. We're going to do this instead. We'll see how this works out, because sometimes people say, Weiner, you ain't the middle. And I'm like, all right, it's left, right, basically the same thing. So if you're looking for the middle, I'm going to work in all of my middle material now.
We're defining the middle best we can.
Exactly.
With the left versus the right. So earlier this week, a lot of controversy, a lot of to-do about the fact that President Trump suggested that as a result of the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict, maybe the U.S. could take over Gaza. That's been interpreted to mean some aspect of purchase, military action, some sort of coalition that could maybe be built together. Your initial reaction to that and kind of how you take that in as the representative of the left in this instance?
I mean, look, here's the thing. I mean, it's classic Trump in one regard. Completely half-baked idea, and everyone's kind of left to try to fill in the dots. This was kind of crazy from the word go, because he made it sound like, all right, this is kind of a real estate deal. And the thing that I don't quite get is that this America first. I'm not going to get us into foreign interventions. And all he's been doing is talking about getting us into foreign interventions. And this would be the mother of all of them. Now, as a Zionist and someone who acknowledges that the problems in Gaza have been a long time coming, it's 2.1 some odd million Palestinians live there. The idea that they're going to go move and leave sounds unrealistic. But this is the problem with Donald Trump. Listening to Donald Trump talk about complex foreign affairs is like the guy at the end of the bar who's had a few too many, who's like pontificating on everything he sees on the television. It's impractical. Now, I hope that there's an opportunity now that's created out of the terrible adversity that they've had there, that hopefully we can find a way for the Palestinians to have their homeland, to be in peace, to have self-determination, but also to say we're not going to turn to terrorists as our governing body anymore. Gaza, remember, was governed by Hamas because the people of Gaza chose Hamas to be their leaders, and Hamas campaigned for that job by saying, we're going to keep attacking Israel, and here we are. Yeah. But I think it's wildly unrealistic. They've backed away from it, rejiggered it 1,000 times. But the idea that we're going to go do this, no, but you know who should, and Trump did mention this, the Saudis with all of their blood money, the Arab states in that part of the world, go take care of your brethren. Why you complain about how Israel is taking care of this body of land? Why don't the so-called moderate Arab states step up and do it?
Yeah, and look, and it's obviously a very complicated undertaking. You're talking about a place that's the size of, like, Chicago. And I don't know how many people that were displaced by the ongoing war, what percentage of the population, in other words, isn't actually in Gaza right now. I don't know if there's any available humanitarian figures on that. But you have to figure that, if nothing else, the status quo clearly isn't working, and you refer to the fact that Saudi Arabia potentially could play a role in this. They've since come out and basically said, we're not going to recognize Israeli diplomacy or whatever they said in terms of this plan for the U.S. taking over Gaza. I think that there has to be some way to negotiate the involvement of Jordan and Egypt and basically say, I know you guys have basically said we're going to punt on this for as long as we can, and we don't want anything to do with the situation in Gaza, but that just can't be acceptable. You have to figure out a way to get those people involved, those nations involved, and make it a broad coalition so that this whole situation is no longer just waiting for the next terrorist attack.
Yeah, but remember, when people talk about Gaza, the Egyptians have also said we feel threatened by Gaza. The crossing that comes from Egypt into Gaza has been locked down because Egypt doesn't want these people coming into their part of the world either, because they're fearful they're going to destabilize them. Mm-hmm. And as far as Jordan's a relatively small country. They already have a bunch of Palestinians. The Hashemite kingdom probably thinks, if I have too many Palestinians coming here, I might have problems. Listen, let's face the facts about Gaza, and it's a little different in the West Bank, and it's different in the Golan. No one really wanted Gaza. Israel got stuck with it. Israel got stuck with it because they were attacked in 1968, attacked in 1973, attacked when they were created in 1947-48. So to some degree, those Palestinians are left in Israeli care, I say with air quotes, because no one else wants them. That's the fact for these people. And I just think Donald Trump talking about whose job this is, that's not a bad thing to do. Saying it's going to be the United States of America, because frankly, that is not a place that we want troops. We are supportive of Israel. Ultimately, I believe that Donald Trump is wrong if he says there's no two-state solution. That's the only one for long-term benefit of Israel and the entire region, I think.
You know, Trump has said that there's definitely, and at this point he's clarified, this is not like a U.S. boots on the ground, troops directly involved type situation, and I certainly don't want that. I don't think anybody on the right wants that either. But you know, in terms of the role that the U.S. could play here, I'm struck by the in-between a rock and a hard place thing that Israel constantly deals with here, because clearly in terms of hard power, they could just take out Hamas and just flatten Gaza even more than it's already been with the ongoing war. But they can't do that because the way the international community would say, you're colonizers, it's genocide, it's all this. The U.S., maybe we have to be the ones to kind of take that hit in this instance, not just in terms of providing the money, but also directly being even more involved than we already are.
I know, but there's 2.1 million human beings there. It's not like this whole idea of flatten it, that means killing millions and millions of children, or hundreds of thousands of children, or millions. I don't buy the argument when people say, oh, there's no one innocent there because they voted for Hamas. No, there are kids there. They haven't committed any crime. They don't have any politics. They're just trying to grow up. So I think that ultimately it's not in anyone's interest, this whole notion of flatten it. It doesn't change. You can't wipe out 2 million people and just say, oh, that's the way to solve this problem. Look, it's complicated, but let's remember something. The ideal here is that the two parties negotiate, that the Jews of the region, Israel, and the Arabs of the region, everyone else, sit down and negotiate this thing. It's haunted now. I hear doors opening and
Someone's
closing
coming
around
in the back door of the studio here.
I mean, we actually share the space with a bodega, so it's like I have no idea where. But long story short, it has to be negotiated, and I want to point out for all of my friends on the left who want to blame Israel, it's been the Palestinians who have walked away from the bargaining table, not the Israelis.
That's fair. I mean, that goes back many, many years, and Yasser Arafat and you know, the decisions made to basically not reach a compromise and the inability to do so is well established. Look, it's kind of my go-to line with this whole thing. We're not going to solve peace in the Middle East over the course of a radio program. And I think, if nothing else, it's definitely bold and decisive talk. You refer to it as somebody kind of at the under end of the bar, having too many and spouting off. Sometimes it takes a little bit of creative thinking and what you might define as craziness to advance the ball down the field. In this case.
Let me just say on that, here's what it does do. It gets a whole bunch of people that never paid attention to the details of it before to finally say, what's the problem with Trump's idea of like wiping it out and taking it over? Well, then you've got to go tell the story. One thing I always say, Israel is at a big disadvantage in the public fight over that part of the world because for the Palestinians to tell their story, they get a kid in blue jeans that are ripped, they put on a bandana and throw a stone, their whole story has now been told. For Israel, you got to know a little bit about the history, a little bit about the challenges there. And Trump, at least the conversation has gotten people thinking, well, what's the matter with just making this the Riviera of the Middle East? Well, you've got a lot of people who are living there, and I think we should remember the humanity of the thing, that the Israelis have a right to peace and security. The Palestinians, they should have some right of self-determination. But if they keep choosing terrorism, they're going to keep getting back to this spot.
It'll be the American strip. Okay, moving on. So Trump's tax plan here kind of taken shape. It was on, I guess, maybe Thursday that he met with House lawmakers, and they talked about the way that they want to implement some of this. Of course, well known from the campaign trail, no tax for tips. Trump has also talked about no tax on seniors, no tax on overtime. He talked about closing the carried interest loophole. So, Anthony, I'll kick it over to you on your thoughts here with this proposed tax plan.
Love it. I mean, I love those things. It's interesting. Donald Trump is saying, I don't want to tax on Social Security. By and large, the people that live on Social Security are middle-class people, and those people that are kind of largely struggling to make it. Social Security is the best anti-poverty program we've ever had in this country. Tax on tips, I'm fine with it. I'm not sure why we want a certain amount of income for just this type of worker, but people earning money on
Well,
tips.
Trump had to try to win Nevada. No, I'm kidding.
No, hey, that's why campaigns are sometimes good, when people have to sometimes say popular things. No tax and overtime. Again, these are Democratic things, middle class. And the last time they did the tax cuts in 2017, it was overwhelmingly for very wealthy people. Carried interest, for those of our listeners who don't know, these are hedge fund guys. That's not earned income. That's great. Here's the problem, though. There's a lot of money in their proposals. And generally speaking, the Republicans have said, we don't want to give tax cuts to those people. We want to give tax cuts to businesses, tax cuts to the very wealthy. If we can figure out a way to do it. But some people at this table are very concerned about debt and deficits. The 2017 tax cuts created an environment where Donald Trump was responsible for 1/4 of all of the national debt we've run up in this country. He did himself in 4 years. This sounds like it's going to make it worse. But as far as those proposals, those Democratic proposals, more power to them.
Well, look, and I think that the overarching theme, potentially even of the second Trump administration, could be called negotiation. And I think that you have the same theme bleeding over from the Middle East to this whole tax plan. I'm curious to get your take on the way Congress kind of functions and the way House lawmakers could potentially be the ones to push through one entire bill that has the tax plan in addition to border security. And then if it goes through the Senate, it's going to be more piecemeal and stuff like that. But putting that on hold for a second, I think that the interesting thing about the carried interest loophole is myself, many other conservatives, people on the right, thinking about the way capital moves and flows and how important investment is. If we could lower the capital interest, the capital gains tax, and at the same time remove that loophole. So I don't know how many hedge fund managers there are in the United States that are making, But again, it's a drop in the bucket compared to the big
Remember,
picture.
Steve Moore just got off our airwaves. If they're here, they're listening to us now.
That's true. I should tread lightly. But no, that being said, if you say, okay, fine, these people who work on these big funds, they have to pay their income tax rate, but we're also going to, in the interest of drawing in more capital from offshore, let's say, or bringing it back, given the way capital moves in response to tax rates, let's lower the capital gains tax even further. How would you feel about that?
Well, listen, here's my general bias. Earned income should be taxed lower than unearned income. You work hard, you're on the construction site, you're slinging hash at a diner, you're working hard as a radio host. Those things, your work should be taxed lower than dividends, then carried interest, then capital gains, then money you make in the lottery, then money your relatives handed down to you. Those should be taxed higher. That's my bias. I honor work. This is a democratic principle. I honor the work that you do. Now, if people want to say to me that we should encourage people to invest in ways that grow the economy, that's why we charge less tax on capital gains. We want people to invest in businesses. I guess I'm fine with that as an idea. But here's what happens when you and I are trying to figure out tax laws. We're thinking, all right, what's the tax rate? Because we're taxed on our earnings. Rich people don't care about their income. They care about things like dividends, and they're getting taxed less. Mm-hmm. I don't believe, frankly, Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos should be taxed less than the people that listen to our show. I just don't believe that's a fair thing.
I think that's a fair perspective, but at the same time, I also wonder sometimes how much Democrats or just people of the left, let's say, get caught up in some of this kind of punitive way of looking at it almost. Like you don't like the fact that the rich people who have these investments are not paying as high a rate of tax as income and stuff like that. But it has a lot to do with the way the economy functions and works and the way you want to incentivize investment. First of all, you're never going to get me to argue against cutting the income tax or getting rid of it altogether, frankly. So I'm kind of on the same side as you on the one side, but then I'm also saying we can't.
Let me ask you something, though. Should we give Jeff Bezos a tax cut?
I mean, I can't really picture that being something I would sign up for just on its face.
Right, but 2017, we gave people like Jeff Bezos enormous tax cuts. They're doing fine. Elon Musk is doing fine. The very wealthy are doing fine.
But generally speaking, I guess I am in favor of just cutting taxes, period. Because
but wait a minute. Hold on a second. You've got taxes, and I know you don't like this language, is a way that we decide who's going to be responsible to what, who pays for what. Someone has to pay for the Department of Defense. Someone has to pay for healthcare. Someone has to pay to pave our roads. Someone has to pay to clean up that subway I just got off of. Okay, someone has to pay for these things. So we collect taxes. We don't like it. I know nobody ever wins an argument saying, I love taxes. But I want to tell you something. I know I want to pay more taxes. I want to pay more taxes because that means I'm making more money, right? If I'm ever paying $1 million in taxes, I am loving it. But when we have to decide how we fund government, I would rather give Jeff Bezos a tax increase and cut the taxes of our listeners. That's my bias. So if someone is going to get a tax cut, it should be. I believe that tax cuts ultimately should be around fairness and if we need to fund stuff. In the days of the Gulf War, we should have raised the tax to pay for that war because we didn't pay for it. We just did it on a credit card. In today's world, where frankly I don't think revenues are a real big issue. Now it's just a matter of what's fair. And what's fair is those things you listed that Donald Trump said he wants to do, tax on tips, Social Security, those types of things. I'm fine. But if you're going to give a tax cut to Donald Trump, your priorities are in the wrong place.
So we're talking about taxes. We're talking about different ideas of what the rate should or shouldn't be. Rich people like Jeff Bezos, the world's richest, Elon Musk, as you say in our little rundown here, keeps rolling. Where are you at with Musk and DOGE and the stuff that they're doing with USAID?
Here's the thing. I just have a problem with the whole accountability. I don't know where this guy – look, let's put the shoe on the other foot. Let's assume it was Mark Zuckerberg, who under a Democratic administration,
the conservative Mark Zuckerberg,
yeah,
or the
exactly.
liberal one?
Which one? Exactly. Good question. Mark Zuckerberg of 2016, Hillary Clinton wins. They give Mark Zuckerberg the keys to your private information at the Treasury Department. I'm going to guess here, you'd be losing your marbles. You're like, we're turning this over to a big social media guy, the people who can't keep their own information safe, who can't run their own business, who clearly have the finger on the scale for one party and not the other. You'd lose your marbles because not so much that reform of government was happening. You wouldn't even mention that. You'd say, why are we giving the keys to our private government information to this guy? That's the way I feel about Musk. There's no transparency. We have no idea what he's doing with the access, and there's no transparency. And every once in a while, we'll see something on Twitter X, we found $80,000 worth of New York Times subscriptions, which turned out to be utter baloney. And we have no trace. So it's the transparency part of it. The reform part of it, knock yourself out.
Okay. So first of all, I will add some grace to the discussion and say, yes, I think that the oligarchical nature of kind of Musk and Trump is something that anybody would naturally be concerned by. And certainly if the shoe was on the other foot,
front row
like
with the inauguration. I couldn't get you to bite on it then, but yes.
Like you said, if it was a hypothetical of a Zuckerberg or somebody like that on the other side, then I could certainly understand your perspective. But let's just be frank. In terms of the so-called access to information that DOGE has or whatever, your concern is your own, and it's warranted in that respect. But he's not using it to like dox people or try to steal people's identity or get their social security number and put it up on the web. It's about looking at the way this money is being used on behalf of the taxpayer.
Says who?
I mean, again, says the chief executive who's employing this team to basically work on his behalf as a high-level efficiency
But it
analyst.
doesn't. So hold on a second. Donald Trump has not said he knows every last thing that this guy's doing. That's the problem. You've deputized this guy who's not even a cabinet-level official. He's not been approved with advice consent. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars to get into this position by supporting Donald Trump. I guess my thing is, like, you say, I trust him. I mean, that's the short version.
Sure.
I trust him with the keys.
Or trust Trump.
And my question, well, no, trust Musk.
Right, but I'm saying who's the guy that chose him to be in that position?
I get it, but we have systems of government. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. We have the Government Accountability Office that found $238 billion worth of waste in the government last year. Okay, the Republicans never took up that bill, never took up that report. Rather, the inspectors general, whose job it is to go dig deep into agencies, they were just fired. I am just suspicious of the guy in terms of the goal, a top to bottom review, going after AID, less than 1% of the budget. Wake me up when you get to the Defense Department.
And I definitely can't sway the concept away from not trusting Elon Musk. That's going to be probably where you're at for the remainder of the show and who knows how long. But I will say, don't forget that the judge just said the most DOGE can do is basically say to an actual government employee, this is what we should be doing based off our analysis. So when we come back, we're going to talk about the transgender ban, maybe the military, but also really sports, girls' sports, and keeping biological men out of girls' sports. We'll talk about that. Are eggs rising in price, lowering in price? And what about the CIA and its connection to all this? It's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin on the left versus the right. Welcome back to the left versus the right. I'm James Flippin, and he's Anthony Weiner. So Anthony, as one of the resident leftists here at the station, you can appreciate the
One
fact.
of them? Who's
I guess
the other?
The only?
Yeah, more or less.
Someone called you the token liberal.
Yeah, that's
I think,
right.
At
That's the
WABC.
token, exactly.
So I guess in some ways I'm like the token member of the LGBTQ, I guess. And in that respect,
I don't want to hear about your hobbies.
and in that respect, my lifestyle. And in that respect, the transgender issue is one that I'm kind of often asked to comment on, or people want to know my opinion. And I do think that there ought to be a place in our society where, consenting adults, people who feel really strongly about their gender identity and they want to go through with it with hormones and plastic surgery and that's their right to do so. But when it gets involved with kids, I think is when a lot of people on the right get a little bit more squeamish and object to a lot of the stuff. So in that respect, with sports, it's kind of a similar thing, right? Sports are a protected thing. It's a created environment with rules and boundaries, and you can only do this and do that. And so it kind of makes sense that you'd have some level of qualification surrounding biological status and the concept of, men going through puberty at a different age and in a different way. So where are you at with this particular issue? And we can get into the military one a little bit too. We've done that in the past, but more so, I guess, on the context of sports.
Now, I was hoping to hear you state your position. You're in a kind of a more I didn't hear you tell me what yours is, but all right, I'll go first. That's I guess the prerogative of the guy that introduced the subjects. And if our listeners haven't noticed, we're letting you do that now because, believe it or not, some people thought my setups were unfair. Yours are impeccable.
You're letting me pick up the ball and run with it.
Here's what it is.
Regardless of my gender identity.
Here's what it is. It's your news chops. You're good at summarizing news because in addition to doing commentary, you do news. But anyway, let's look. When people ask me at the end of the day, why am I a Democrat? There are economic reasons that I believe in the working guy. I believe in standing up to bullies. But I also believe that Democrats fundamentally, and I personally, I don't like it when people single out the other and for ridicule, for persecution, for discrimination. And the trans community is this version nowadays of the other that people are beating up on.
And you said the same thing with Nancy Mace, with the bathroom debate.
Right. I just don't like that. I don't like when people do that. It's fundamentally the Brooklyn in me comes out about why are you targeting people that really can't stand up for themselves, either because they're small in number or discreet, or is it around their sexual things, or whatever it is. And I kind of am in that place about this too. For all of the talk that the Republicans do about DEI and trans and woke, do you know who talks about DEI and trans and woke? Republicans. Ron DeSantis waged a whole campaign about this for president, went nowhere with it. Books getting pulled off of shelves. And now who's eligible to participate in sports. And I got to tell you something, I don't care. If you want to go to a local school board and complain, if you have a child who maybe is in a sport, I don't hear those. I hear people going on Fox News, going on these airwaves, and complaining about how outrageous it is. And then when you look at the actual numbers that this impacts, it's single digits. And I just find it the ultimate in bullying. And I just say, listen, you're the president of the United States, Donald Trump. You lead all the people. It is always going to be easy to single out a migrant or to single out a trans person or to single out someone who's in a minority group to be punished. Don't do it. Don't do it.
Look, and I appreciate that. Like, I really do. I think that perspective is really noble in the sense that you talk about you don't want to see people who are in any way marginalized or kind of being made to feel different, to not feel as though they have some champion kind of in their corner. And I totally get that. But I wonder, you're a father to a son, not a girl. But, I mean, think about that, right? In terms of what it is to play sports or be involved in athletic competition, and we're going to do some sports later today, it's kind of, you do have to have parameters, right? Like when I played youth football, there was a rule that said, okay, if you're under 7th grade, you can't be more than 150 pounds and carry the football. You know what I mean? You can't be a wide receiver. You can't be a running back. You can't be a quarterback. You can play on the line, but you can't do that. There's other things that are just practical applications of it, right? If your kid is husky and tall, they're probably going to be a forward on the basketball team, not the point guard. And so there's certain realities in life that you can't necessarily get away from. I think that it's a misnomer to try to teach kids who may be trans or trying to figure out their gender identity that there's no sense of you might not be able to take part in certain things just because of your identity. In other words, if you are a biological male and you want to transition and you want to go through the hormones and you want to do this, and by the time you get to a certain age, maybe you're going to choose to have the surgery, whatever, you should know that this is going to have to be a challenge for you in many different ways.
Yeah, but
it's not just, you can't just run away from that.
Well, no one's running away from the idea that these are complicated questions, I guess.
And sports has to go with that because, I mean, again, if you're a biological male, you have physical
Let's
advantages.
first of all, let's be careful now, because you and I might be you might have more knowledge of this than I. I have seen people that might be defined as biologically female, two of them standing side by side, where one could be muscular and husky and have a high level of testosterone, and another one is very small. There are differences, individual differences with people. But I guess the problem that I have is that, the basis of the word liberal is liberty and libertarian, with something you and I have in common.
That's why I don't like to use that word. I like to say progressive.
No, I understand that, but you do from time to time on your Wikipedia page say libertarian.
Slip up.
And the libertarian part of me is like, I don't want government getting into certain conversations that they're just not good at. They're not good at deciding when a woman's health is at risk. Stay out of it. They're not good at deciding whether a family should have a child. Stay out of it.
But
let me just finish this thought.
Okay, fine.
So the idea that now the president of the United States, with one of his dopey 200 proclamations with the Sharpie that a 9-year-old might yet use, is now going to make this proclamation from the White House, to me, seems like an overstep, particularly since the section of the law they're using is one that gets enforced by, wait for it, the Department of Education.
But and hopefully that'll be going away soon. But
talk about hypocrisy. First of all, I want no Department of Education, but I want all their rules.
A 9-year-old would use a magic marker, not a Sharpie. So let's just get that straight. And then I think even in terms of family building, women's right to choose and stuff, you of course are someone who believes that there is some cutoff in terms of abortion.
I believe my legislators should stay the heck out of it. I believe small government.
Entirely.
They should stay.
So you don't think there should be any statute against?
For me, I could not imagine ever having an abortion. Jack Jordan was born. I can imagine it, but I'm a fully grown adult that can make a decision. And my former wife, we don't need Tommy Tuberville telling me whether I should have an abortion or not.
No, but wait a minute. Hold on. I'm trying to get this straight. And we didn't even plan on getting into the abortion thing per se, but it's kind of similar. In other words, you would agree that you're not going to have abortion in the third trimester
if it's medically necessary for that woman. Of course.
Okay, fine. So you're saying life of the mother.
No, I'm saying, why are you asking me to make rules for who? Find the woman I'm making a rule for and tell me why I should. Why should I be making rules for any woman?
In the hypothetical scenario, you're saying?
Any scenario, a real one. Get a woman in here and ask her if I should be making decisions for her, or some majority white legislature in Texas, a male white legislature.
All right, I'm surprised.
I believe that government does not belong in every aspect of our lives.
And you know that I agree with you on that, but I'm surprised that you wouldn't at least agree there's some point at which you're even not in favor of.
I believe there are some issues, and maybe this is one of them. The how much testosterone someone can have to be eligible to be on a swim team at the University of San Jose? Really?
Okay.
That's what we need our president for? The reason he's doing it is to bully the other and give content for Fox News. I don't think that there's any real reason for it.
You are well in your rights to feel that way. I think that the truth is there are many girls and their families who feel as though they end up getting bullied. Because when it comes to athletic competition and their desire to play soccer with fellow girls, play volleyball, to be involved in swimming competition at a higher level, let's say, they feel as though it's unfair and inherently unjust for them to have to compete with biological men.
Right,
and
but
I understand that you're saying you don't want to have any line drawn or anything like that. Or I'm not trying to be facetious.
Here, do this. No, I appreciate it. Next time someone calls into the station, and you've been doing a lot of shows, and hopefully you'll be doing more. Someone calls in about this. A question I always ask my listeners is, has this happened to you? Do you have a child who is competing against someone who you believe is not of the same gender? And 99.999% of the time, no, but this person, or Riley Gaines, or whatever it is. And that's the point. We're a society that loves to have fights and conflict. And so we're having a conflict now with the people who are the subject of it are minuscule in number, and they feel that it's just people bullying them. And I see no reason for it.
I think that you're actually totally right in saying it's not as widespread as people think, and maybe it's not that big an issue. It's kind of a scare tactic, maybe sometimes. But if this is going to truly be an example of society changing, and gender identity becoming more fluid in terms of not just what boys and girls are allowed to do, the toys they can play with, the colors they can wear, but whatever. It's actually in the sense of trying to normalize this concept of your brain as a gender versus what your body is and that kind of thing, which, again, to be totally clear, I have no idea. But if that's where we're going, then we do have to have those discussions about setting parameters around things like medical treatment, sports, the way
what is
we're
you use the pronoun we.
Bathrooms.
We use the pronoun we. You and I work at a radio station. If someone is out there with a real question around who's going to be eligible to do what, you grew up and played Pop Warner football and they made some rules and the community said, all right, let's have these rules and move on. You say we. Everything does not have to be your government telling you stuff.
Wow, I'm loving this, actually.
100%, right?
I agree with you on that.
You and I, the Venn diagram of where liberals and conservatives used to agree used to be much bigger than it is today.
Right.
I believe that any conservative that says, I want to go into a woman's hospital room and make a healthcare decision for her is a phony a conservative. I think real conservatives are the ones that say, you know what? I might not like the decision that woman makes, but I respect her right to make it, right? We had a moment in this country with Caitlyn Jenner, right, where one of the last remaining barriers fell, that someone was a poster child for a thing that made some of us uncomfortable, but we finally had an open conversation about it. They were allowed to come out, be themselves because of Caitlyn Jenner. Now, if Caitlyn Jenner wants to go compete in men's sports, should I care? Why should I?
Well,
whatever.
That would be quite a Back to the Future moment.
No, it would be like, who cares? It's a relative. And by the way,
Kris Jenner comment.
And by the way, let's keep in mind something else. Somewhere there are even young people, old people, people who for their identity, this is how they identify, this is how they feel, this is how comfortable. They're not playing sports. But what we're saying to all of those people, there's something wrong with you and we're going to bully your whole community around this issue of sports. And I don't believe in doing that.
So to put a bow on this then, in other words, you're kind of making the argument that you feel as though if a town in Alabama says we don't allow individuals born as men to compete in girls' sports up until the age of 16 or 17, then that's what that community does. If here in Manhattan, there is no such thing and anybody can play, much like with the abortion thing, kind of making an analogy, that's the way you think is the better way to handle it.
I don't think people should ban books because they mention gay people anywhere in the country. However, I also don't think that the president of the United States or the governor of a state should be calling to do it. I think we have school boards. Let them figure this stuff out. And will we always be happy? No, but that doesn't mean we have to constantly weigh in on every issue. You guys are obsessed with this woke stuff, and I just think we got to get over it. There's important stuff out there.
So from one obsession to the next, and this is the left versus the right here on 77 WABC. He's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. And we're rocking along with the 2-hour version of the left versus the right. If you're looking for the middle, well, we're trying to identify it right now. But eggs are up in price. It's, of course, a function of just inflation in general, but also
love it.
Also bird flu.
Oh yeah.
We just had the
invented
closing of
on January 21st. Bird flu.
Stop. That's totally. It was a bigger story before that. So, you had the live poultry market shut down in New York. I didn't even know that we had live poultry markets.
You're staring at the trees and not the forest.
Okay.
And for those of you who are listening, I still wrote most of these headings, and I wanted to get this one.
But you didn't do your fun. What would your fun headline be? What would your headline be for eggs?
I mailed it in. What came first, the chicken price or the egg price? I don't know. The point I'm making here is that like the swallows to Capistrano, we now see rise in confidence about the economy and how well the economy is doing among Republicans who just a month ago were saying everything was terrible. I don't hear people on the airwaves here at ABC talking about inflation anymore, because the reason is it was coming down, it's still lower, and there are still things that are expensive. But more importantly, we just got done with 6 minutes about trans rights, and the President of the United States did not get elected on that. He got elected on immigration and inflation. And I am waiting. He said on day one, prices are going to come down, and they're all... the Biden economy is still humming along, thank God. But
the Biden economy.
When is Donald Trump going to have a proclamation on bringing down the price of eggs? When's that going to happen?
All right. So I think that you have to have the understanding that a ship turns slowly, right? Like you don't just quickly.
I love it. All of the Biden talking points. I was waiting.
Throw the wheel, and inflation is transitory. Oh wait, no, that is totally the Biden talking point. No, and look, in terms of what's going on with the eggs right now, obviously. I am concerned that if there's going to be a total decimation of
inflation's
flocks,
out of control, right?
That it's going to have a inflationary pressure. Here's the thing: inflationary pressure and inflation are two different things.
Is inflation out of control right now?
Yes.
Okay.
And there's factors.
Oh,
and
who's
there's
the president?
factors behind which. Why do you think DOGE is so busy?
Exactly.
Why do you think DOGE is so busy?
Years,
we're cutting the government spending.
So when Joe Biden dramatically
Joe Biden,
yeah, whatever.
That's a good
Joe
one.
Biden,
I gotta use that.
How come no one used
How does nobody
that?
have that
Someone
before?
Trademark.
Yeah, seriously.
When Joe Biden said these same words, you scoffed at him. I just want to point out that this is still the Joe Biden economy. Things are doing better, but I have not seen Donald Trump talk about egg prices.
All right.
Coming down.
And there is still concern, of course, with AI, and nobody knows for sure what's going on with the
AI
deep
eggs?
seek.
I'm ready.
Oh yeah, let's get some AI eggs.
Bring me an AI
like Star
omelet,
Trek,
Salas.
like Star Trek. Computer, give me some omelets. All right. When we come back, we're going to talk about the CIA. We'll also talk about Pam Bondi, who just got confirmed as AG, and what's going on with foreign influence and the way that connects to the government. It's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. The left versus the right on 77. Come back to the left versus the right. He is Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. And rocking along with the 2-hour version of LVR, as I sometimes like to refer to it. But, we're getting into this issue now surrounding the CIA, the FBI, issues of transparency, and also government efficiency.
And vengeance.
Okay, vengeance. So, Anthony, what do you see as kind of going on right now and what you call the outing of the CIA?
Well, we had two big pieces of news this week that I think are kind of one and the same, in that the White House apparently asked the CIA, tell us everyone you've hired recently, because they're trying to weed out whatever influence of whatever past administration. If there's a through line for everything that Donald Trump is doing, you're trying to pull up by the roots anything that was done before, including by the Biden administration, including his own administration.
AKA draining the swamp.
AKA draining the swamp. Call it what you will. But they're doing it in ways that, frankly, endanger people's lives. They asked the CIA, send us everyone hired at the CIA in the last 2 years. They sent it over to the White House in a non-classified document that is now floating around Washington. Can you imagine the glee that the Chinese have now that they have a list of everyone recently hired at the CIA? The FBI, we talked about it last week and the week before. The DOGE or the White House or Pam Bondi or whoever it is says, we want to know everyone at the FBI that worked on the January 6 cases. There are 13,000 FBI agents. They think as many as 6,000 might have been working on this big crime scene of January 6th. And the FBI agents have been saying, wait a minute, I don't want to have my name out there in the world as someone who worked on this case.
Gee, I wonder why.
Well, because they've also they also worked on the Bin Laden case, right? Those people, who knows who wants to get there. So I guess the thing is, and that's why when you did your setup, it says we're draining the swamp, we're reducing headcount, whatever it is. No, you're engaged in these acts of vengeance. And the FBI agents and the CIA agents that work for our country, they're patriots, man. And these people should not be endangered by a petulant orange leader in the White House saying, I want to get rid of everyone who ever worked here. We need CIA agents and we need FBI agents. And the only reason I can think of, and we're going to get to this a little later, you'd want to get rid of CIA agents is they probably know about the foreign entanglements that you and your administration have with the Russians and others.
Oh, boy. I waited. I wanted to.
Now you know why they took away my right to set up these issues.
I wanted to get Russia in there, of course. And I'd also like to just note that orange is the Mets letters on your sweatshirt. Tanned flesh is the color of which.
Really? Can I ask you about that? Why is the tan flesh line look like a mask around his face?
Unlike our own Sid Rosenberg, he's smart enough to wear the actual glasses. You got to wear the glasses. I know nothing about tanning beds, but you do have to wear the glasses to protect your eyes.
Are you telling me that Donald Trump, oh, this is such a gross image, sits on a tanning bed? By the way, didn't you see he just got his eyebrows done? Like, he looks ridiculous.
They look kind of weirdly colored in a way.
The dude looks ridiculous.
He looks great.
What would he look like if he didn't have the orange spray paint and the weird who knows?
I would actually, there's been plenty of memes online that have said, like, they joked, like, when he comes back for 2.0, he was going to have like a buzz, like shaved hair and like a little goatee and like, no dye, none of the fake tan. I do almost wish that he kind of was willing to embrace that, but it's so much a part of his image now, the entire thing.
But you remember,
you can't separate it from
You remember,
the
we're getting off the subject a little bit, you remember there was this moment, I don't remember where President Obama wore a tan suit.
Yes.
And I swear to God, the heads exploded over at Fox News and whatever, they had different. And I didn't understand what the kerfuffle was about. I'm like, hey, he looks fine in a tan suit. He's the black guys. He looks fine. Why don't we pay more attention to how ridiculous our cult leader looks? The guy's, he's orange, for crying out loud.
People get very mad at me when I don't slap your hand for saying cult leader.
Last week I had 2 calls about how rude I was, and one of them even said, ask your mom, and my mom texted me and says, oh, no, that's when I called the president a prostitute. Yes, I shouldn't have done it. I shouldn't have called him a prostitute. Yeah, it was with us when I said that he's selling all this stuff from...
Oh, okay.
I was like, he buys shoes and Bitcoin and Bibles. I'm like, he's just selling himself.
Well, we could get into some of the stuff with Bitcoin, as a matter of fact, when we do some of the other stuff that you.
But anyway,
getting
back to this.
So with regards to the CIA, let me just say that I would agree with you that I certainly don't want to see any agents outed and put at risk at home or abroad by any sort of electronic communication that puts that kind of stuff at risk. The term recently hired, I'm not really sure what that...
They did last 2 years, they wanted to know.
Okay, so I would imagine as though, and maybe you do, I don't, that there's some limit to which, like, in other words, you're not going to have been inserted at some covert operation in Beijing in the last 2 years.
I'll be honest with you. You're the guy that knows all the conspiracy theories about the CIA.
I got to check. Let me check my dossier.
All I know is what I see on The Diplomat on Netflix. I don't really know how it works, but I don't think, by the way...
2 years, I don't think they're deep into the CCP.
No, but I think that what happens...
So they're trying to cut down on the federal largesse.
Oh, you think that what they're asking those names is because they want to reduce the CIA by that number of people?
Maybe. I mean, look at what happened with Marco Rubio. He said, there's like 12,000 people working for the State Department. I only need 250.
Did he say that?
Something like that.
I don't mind, just to make it very clear, I don't mind, there's this notion of zero-based budgeting. This idea that, what we do in the federal government is we look what we're spending and figure out how much less or how much more we should spend. If someone wants to make the argument we should do zero-based budgeting, which is you look at everything and then decide what you want to spend, I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm. You've been consistent on that, I think.
I do think there is kind of this philosophical thing that goes on where, like, the new guy comes in, like he did at Twitter, and say, I'm going to slash the budget. We have here at the radio station this room of electronics where the transmitter hooks up to whatever it is. We have a guy, Chris Libertini, who's got this big board of Senate, just coming and saying, all right, let's just fire everybody. We would not know what we're doing. This whole idea that expertise is a vice in government, where we know it's an asset in every other walk of life, is mind-boggling to me. We say, we want someone who runs it like a business. Well, look at what Elon Musk did at Twitter. Elon Musk went in, he bought something for $45 billion. It has a market cap or value now about $16 billion. Okay, was that a success? He lost all the advertising. He fired a bunch of people. The company is much worse than it used to be. I don't get the idea that if we honor something in life, a professor that knows stuff, a businessman who knows stuff, a technician that knows stuff, why in the federal government suddenly it's a vice? Maybe you can explain that to me.
Well, certainly the concept of, not having your budget balanced or things moving in the wrong direction from a growth of debt perspective, I guess I could see why you would say that X has been a failure or less successful.
Fewer people, fewer advertisers, lower market cap.
Right.
Yeah.
And you also said something very, very dutifully, a dutiful lawmaker, I would say, when you were saying, who's to say that expertise in government, and why is that a vice? And we want experienced people in government. Yeah, but at the same time, there's no incentive to apply that in an efficient way, in a way that reduces the amount of spending, benefits the bottom line, keeps things in control.
What's the bottom line in the case of the CIA?
Well, what do you mean? What's the mission?
What's the bottom line? It's not all dollars and cents. For example, if you can spend $10 in the CIA to avoid spending $2 million in the Defense Department a year later,
sure,
that seems like a good value. That's the problem.
And if you're buying Twitter and it's tanking financially to save free speech and Western civilization, then I would say that's a success as well. But let's just leave that.
Okay.
Let's just leave that there. That being said, in terms of the CIA, and you talk about the ability potentially to do something in a more covert way, and then you're avoiding all-out war somewhere or something like that. Should we crack the egg, no pun intended with the inflation argument, on the USAID and all this stuff that's going on?
That's another great example. If you're able to prop up a civil society so they don't elect Hamas, as an example, although they're not functioning very much in the territories, it's worth it for us rather than have the Department of Defense have to go buy a bunch of missiles a few years from now. I guess the point I'm making is that everyone is like, okay, Musk is a good to an average businessman, right? He's a clear, great engineer, good to average businessman. I don't know if you've seen a Tesla truck recently. Oh my God, I would put a gun in my mouth before I would ride it.
Some people really like them.
Well, apparently not. Their business is falling off. They can't seem to compete in China. That's why he's trying to coddle his Chinese overlords. But my point is, in government, when you're hiring someone to collect the garbage, you're doing that because you want sanitary streets, you want clean streets and fewer rats. You're not going to make a profit doing that.
True.
So so that's just.
But you also don't want to be running massive deficits to the point where, like, the national one is upwards of 38 trillion and growing, and like debt service is like a quarter of the GDP or whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like, you do want to have it in control. So in terms of the need to look at all aspects of government, like you said, all the different aspects of budget. But just let me talk about this, right? Because the point you're making is really, really fascinating, and one that I think needs to be addressed. When you talk about the need or the desire through statecraft or spycraft or whatever for the CIA to be able to do stuff that then avoids a larger whatever, how much can we talk about the engineering of politics in 2014 that happened in Ukraine and the color revolution that unfolded there, with a lot of evidence sort of at the behest and urging of our State Department, because they wanted certain people in charge, and we do that all the time with the CIA. And then 10 years later, we've got this massive war between Ukraine and Russia that our Congress is spending all this money on. So forgive me for saying I'm not so sure that we do want to empower the CIA to be doing all this stuff that opens us up to all these vulnerabilities down the road, whether they meant for it to happen or whether they didn't. And I'm not really sure they didn't.
I totally agree that we should always be checking our foreign policy to see if they're pursuing U.S. interests or not. Now, different people have come up different. It was seen as in U.S. interest to prop up Pinochet in Chile in the 1970s because AT&T or IT&T, whatever it is, they wanted it that way. Okay, bad idea. Vietnam, probably not a great idea. Iraq, probably not a great idea. I'm not saying that every time we get involved internationally, we're doing the right thing. But I'm saying, is it a policy that we would have with President Flippin of trying to figure out ways to spend dimes rather than dollars later? For example, you don't have to go looking for. We now feed poor kids because we know if kids are less hungry, they're more likely to learn, their brains are likely to develop, they contribute to the economy, they pay taxes, our country gets better. Is food stamps go down as looking like a cost? Perhaps, but just like you and your business friends would say, sometimes you invest in R&D.
Sure.
Sometimes you invest in things that work out and don't work out. I think that the way you measure things is not entirely in dollars and cents. And I will say this about Ukraine. Our investments around the world don't mean that Xi in China and Putin in Russia don't continue to be assholes. That's too high a bar. We are going to have things that are going to wind up being problems. Does that mean we, the most powerful nation on earth, don't do what we can to try to get U.S. interest advanced?
Well, again, I'm going to resist really, really hard the temptation to snugly pull on my tinfoil cap, as you would accuse me of doing, with regards to whatever these USAID-funded NGOs are doing on the ground there in Ukraine, and the fact that we never really hear about peace talks, but we hear about all the money flowing over there. So, forgive me for basically saying, okay, sure, I'm sure there is pressure from Putin and the ongoing desire to not see Ukraine be a member of NATO and all that stuff that we've talked about. But why is there so much U.S. money flowing into this situation, and yet we never hear about
most of the money, unlike what your cult leader says, most of the money is coming from Europe, not from us.
Anthony with the cult leader.
Most of the money that we're sending is not money anyway. It's armaments that are made by U.S. citizens and U.S. companies. And frankly, I don't like it that there's a war going on, but there's a war going on because Putin invaded another country. this whole like CIA this and Orange Revolution. Putin invaded another country. I'm going to say that again because I don't know how you missed it. Putin invaded another country that is a friend and ally of ours, okay? And now they're trying to repel that country. The peace talks, well, if the peace talks in your mind are give away half your country, I don't think we would do that. I don't think the Ukrainians should be asked to do
Well,
that.
I mean, we talked about it earlier in the show with regards to Gaza. And you know that the Israelis have been willing to give away land in the southwest or west portion of the country if that means in a conciliatory way we can have peace and lasting peace, and that's been rejected. So, yeah, you do have to have the ability to have loss on both sides. In other words, like, why don't we ever hear about peace talks there? And how much is it? Because we want the gravy train to keep flowing here, and Lockheed Martin to keep getting paid. And
very big difference. Well, by the way, and also the citizens who work in those companies, you guys are so pro-business, there are citizens of the United States, mostly in red states, that work for companies making bullets and making bombs and making tanks that are benefiting from this. And by the way, so are we in our national security. We're getting to see what works on the battlefield against one of our... This is the dream, it should be, the dream of people like you who want a smaller footprint and a smaller government. We have a proxy army that's fighting our biggest opponent right now, and all we have to do is send them guns. To me, it's a pretty good deal.
But wait a second. But I don't want just the grist mill to be churning out dead Ukrainians and Russians at the goal, with the goal of figuring out
call
what
your
works
buddy
on the
Putin.
battlefield.
Yes, an invasion was a terrible thing, and the Israel example is so ahistorical it makes my head hurt. Let's remember, the West Bank is what the Israelis took as part of the war in 1967 when they were attacked, when they just had a narrow sliver of land, and that was... Now, you can make an argument that going back in history, maybe they shouldn't have kept that land as a buffer on their west side. Okay, I'm open to that idea. And now they have said repeatedly in negotiations, we will give some of that back to the Palestinians.
Well, yeah, I mean, you go back far enough in the 20th century, then it gets even more complicated in terms of what is or isn't there in the Levant. So...
Well, let's not don't get all Palestinian on me now. Let's just, if you want to go back, we can go back to this book. What's it called? The Bible. Yeah, we can go to that one as well.
All right, so we are gonna take a break here, but when we come back, we're gonna talk about Pam Bondi and how that connects to some of this discussion over foreign influence.
We've got to do some sports here. It's Super Bowl Saturday.
How about that? It is.
I
Super
wore
Bowl.
my Mets.
You wore your Mets thing, and we'll figure out what our favorite maybe Super Bowl traditions are, or foods, or whatever. Are you going to a Super Bowl party?
To me, this is hockey season, man.
Oh, yeah. All right. It is hockey season. All right. Well, when we come back, more of the left versus right. He's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. Welcome back to the left versus the right. I am James Flippin, and he's Anthony Weiner. This is our second hour. This is where we'd normally be, kicking off the left versus the right. We're coming off the middle because we're trying to define the middle now.
Well, but here's the thing.
There
are a lot of people, you might not know this because you only come in for this hour. There are a lot of people, according to Chad and John and Margot, that go up because they come in for the middle. They're usually more lefty, and this is where they feel comfortable, is with the middle. And then there are a lot of people that turn their radio off from 3 to 4 and then turn it back on. So we're just telling all those people you missed a really exciting first hour of left versus right.
It's true. They'll have to come back next Saturday for more.
Yeah, we'll see. Let's see if they keep doing it. To be honest with you, I have no vanity about this. I enjoy doing the middle, but I enjoy doing this as well. So whatever people have been asking for more of this show. I don't know why.
And let me just say that for the fans of the middle, of which there are, because Lizzie and I were talking about it in the newsroom, that we're sorry that we had to take that away.
You've not taken anything away. Let's just see. By the way, here's the good thing about this station is that, among other things, we're very adaptable. Like, we don't have a big board that has to go and make these decisions. You do a lot of it's basically Chad who kind of runs the operations, John and Margot who kind of have said just go out and make interesting programming. And I think that makes it very entrepreneurial. So I'm glad we're doing this. The problem is keeping Eric Salas awake for 2 hours is turning out to be vexing. We have to get more coffee or something like that.
I didn't realize that was going to be as big of a challenge as it is, but we'll get through that. Okay, so one of the things that we were kind of touching on in the last segment was that the CIA is concerned with some of the potential for some of their agents or employees maybe to have been sort of unmasked with the way this document was sent and in request by Trump's White House and the ongoing pursuit of efficiency. In addition to that, there's things tied into the FBI that we should talk about because, of course, Kash Patel is up for confirmation. We have this back and forth between the White House and the FBI concerning the January 6th investigation. And then, of course, Pam Bondi was just confirmed as
she's
Attorney General.
our Attorney General, right.
So all this kind of federal law enforcement stuff is kind of starting to take shape. But why don't you kick it off with your thoughts on
what
the
was the
situation
conversation during the campaign? The conversation during the campaign was Donald Trump saying, I am your vengeance. We're going to pardon all of the January 6th people, which he then did. We are going to go after our enemies, go after anyone that came after me. And when the American people voted, in a very close election, they voted for Donald Trump. But then during the confirmation hearings on FBI and on Justice, the Attorney General, Pam Bondi, she said all the things you'd hope she'd say. We're not on a vengeance tour. We're going to follow the law without fear or favor, all of the normal stuff. And she squeaked by. And now, almost as one of the first actions, even before she got in the door, the Justice Department said to its police force, which is what the FBI is for the Justice Department, we want you to send us anyone who touched the January 6th investigation. And since it was so big, there were so many people involved. You still haven't watched the video, apparently. You're like the one person who goes downtown and says, where did those two towers go? I didn't hear anything about this. But, like, you know, there was a giant crime scene. So there were many, as some estimates are, as many as 6,000 officers of the FBI, agents of the FBI.
At 6? I don't even think I've seen it that high. I think
I saw 4,000. I saw 6,000.
How many agents are there?
To about 13,000, a little more than 13,000.
Wow. So if it's 6,000, that would literally mean that like half the agency was working on it.
But so a bunch of FBI
That's
agents.
prioritization, folks.
Oh, my God. A bunch of the FBI agents who were in this category said, wait a minute, don't turn my information over because I'm fearful it's going to go out there in the world and I'm basically going to be the subject of whatever, death threats, whatever else.
Yeah, but can I just jump in right there?
Yeah.
Okay. Isn't the proverbial left very much in favor of transparency when it comes to policing, body cams, disclosures of footage after the fact?
I'm
going to
say yes. Keep going.
Like, you know, we want to know the names of the officers involved in various incidents and stuff like that.
I'm going to say yes. Keep going.
Okay.
Where are you going with this?
So shouldn't we have the same standard when it comes to the federal police
Apparently,
force?
these officers went to court to hope that their information would not be out there.
Yeah, because they know they were involved in a totally shady operation.
Okay, so isn't there a reasonable concern that a law enforcement officer who's doing his job, investigating a crime, is now going to have yahoos like you saying, yeah, they deserve to be outed, and who knows what comes after that?
For sure. And
remember, there are people on the internet, this may come as a surprise to you since you may be one of them, people on the internet who take that next step and get crazy. We had someone show up at Paul Pelosi's house with a hammer. We have people show up at a pizzeria in Washington looking for where's QAnon hiding. You don't do this. And don't do this. If you search Twitter for the name Anthony Weiner, the number of people with these crazy conspiracy theories about me that are out there, all I'm saying is there are crazies out there. But here's the bigger problem that I think all of this calls attention to, is you want all those people. Why? What is it that the Justice Department is investigating? They're taking people who did their job, who were not decision makers about what crimes they investigate, who were doing their jobs. Cops. And again, I want to make this connection because you want to do this graceful thing of like, I support cops, but not cops who have a federal badge. All they are, now I don't mean to diminish them, is what they are, basically federal cops who are doing the job of trying to enforce the law. They took an oath to the Constitution. And now thousands of them are being lumped into this people that the President of the United States, we're going to get vengeance against these people. I don't understand why we can continue to have this obsession around that. And let me just one point about the transparency thing. Do you know who we don't know the names of? All these 19-year and 20-year-old kids that are working for Musk, they're refusing to give their names, yet they have access to all of our private information.
Well, I believe we do know their title, expert engineer, master engineer.
Yeah, 19-year-old kid.
So, all right, let's just say this. It is kind of fascinating to me the way that this works, where you guys on the left are kind of like big fans of cops, provided they're federal ones, I guess. And we on the right, we like our local cops, but not the federal ones. So it does get a little bit silly after a while. I'll also just say that I kind of love the fact that I would say many on the left are not, and this is a gross generalization, but why not, aren't necessarily huge fans of Christianity. Unless it's Bishop Buddy, then they love Bishop Buddy and Christianity.
I think most people who read and understand the Bible are liberal.
Okay, that's an interesting interpretation. But I will also just point out that it's not QAnon. There's Q and there's Anon.
This is not the first time you've done this.
We've talked about that before.
QAnon is a thing.
They're two different things. There's
No.
anonymous.
Hold on.
What? You're really going to look it up?
No, QAnon, I assume, people say QAnon all the time.
No,
QAnon
it's-
shaman. Right here, the first thing that comes up.
Right, because the colloquialism is QAnon.
Okay,
in
well,
other
I'm a
words,
colloquial, whatever that word means. I'm one of them.
The way that people that don't really know about it all kind of just catch all the
so
term.
you're flexing on how much you know
I'll
of
be
crazy...
honest that I don't even really know that much about it, but I know that there are two different things. There's anonymous and there's Q. And I'll be perfectly frank in saying I don't know that much about what it actually
now,
is.
I did QAnon, and here's what comes up. Wikipedia QAnon, although its origins an older conspiracy, first it was by Q in 2017. Then it's the New York Times, what is QAnon, the viral pro-Trump conspiracy theory? It's a thing. You're wrong. QAnon is a thing. QAnon, BBC. QAnon, what is it? Where did it come from? QAnon.
So we're going with Wikipedia, BBC, and New York
AJC,
Times.
QAnon, what is it?
AJC, even better.
What, the Jews you don't like now? Come on, pal.
I'm saying these are all leftist organizations that, of course, would just say, here's the boogeyman that you don't want to pay attention to.
Congress.gov condemning QAnon. I'm just saying it exists, but if you want to, should we devote some time to what QAnon even is?
But you know what? In a future episode, we probably should.
God,
But let me
if I am ever doing an episode devoted to QAnon,
then
it's a sign
you'll
I've
know
stayed
that
too
you're
long.
actually in hell. Okay.
I've stayed too long.
But look, the January 6th stuff, I'm not going to pretend that I know everything about it. There's so many questions that I'd love to know the answers to. Don't know if I ever will. I largely probably agree with you that even the rank and file agents that were assigned to work on all of that, they're not the ones making the decisions or pulling the strings
Right.
if there is something nefarious that happened. So for them to be caught up in a sort of unfair collateral damage way is definitely a difficult thing. But
Well, but hold on a second.
the
Here's
FBI as a whole has lost the plot. Unfortunately, its rank and file members are kind of part of that.
I know, but FBI is an institution made up of a bunch of people, and these are the people. This is half the people, right?
Sure. I mean, I guess in terms of the field agents or whatever.
Let me demystify it for you. There were allegations that a crime was committed on January 6th, dozens and dozens of crimes. The FBI agents are the ones that went and did some investigation to find out if crimes were committed. They provided informations to the prosecutors to go prosecute the crimes. Just the same way if someone gets mugged, a police officer would go gather clues, look at the video camera, and go do it. So that's what these officers... And they then testified with a hand on a Bible saying, I swear under penalty of perjury that these things are true.
But again, just to play devil's advocate slightly and draw it out further, Derek Chauvin would tell you that he was just following his orders that day, that he was just trying to arrest a guy who was having an opioid overdose and freaking out, and it led to the death of George Floyd.
Okay, but hold on. Let's keep the parallels consistent. That was the allegation of a crime by Chauvin. Who investigated that crime? Members of the police department who testified against Chauvin saying, yes, he committed a crime. Police officers can commit crimes, but the people that are being rounded up now by the Justice Department, the FBI agents, are the ones that investigated other crimes and they did their jobs in that way.
Yes, but what I'm saying to you is, how would we even ever know if Derek Chauvin did or didn't know who it was if we didn't know who he was?
We 100% did. We had police officers who gathered information, testified at a trial, and a judge and a jury said, yeah, Chauvin did it.
And it's probably not even, it's a bad example because there's also viral video of the 8 minutes of what happened with the arrest of
Oh,
George
and there's
Floyd.
no video of January 6th. That's right.
No, but my point is to say that there are other instances in which cops, let's keep it on the local cop side, committed wrongdoings, committed crimes.
Right.
Like the episode of Chappelle's Show, sprinkling crack on the guy after he had a car accident and saying, oh, he had crack. You know, like, of course we know that there's dirty cops, but if you never know who those people are because they're protected some way, isn't this like the thin blue line stuff you guys always talk about?
No, but you're losing.
Like, in other words,
you're losing the train. The
why would it be
6,000
that-
people who are being rounded up are not being, unless you believe they did, are not being accused of any crime. They're being accused of investigating another crime.
But here's the thing. There is a overarching allegation that you're sort of, in my opinion, pretending not to be aware of.
That this is a conspiracy among 6,000 individual police FBI agents?
That there is some level of conspiracy within the FBI. I'm not suggesting that it was all 6,000 agents.
Well, how would it go?
But
How would that conspiracy work? Just walk me through it. How would 6,000 agents conspire and no one step forward and saying, oh, my God, there's a conspiracy going on here to put people in prison?
But I just said that's not exactly what I'm saying. What I'm saying is if it was, let's call it, I don't know how many people you want to say, 2 members, a high-ranking member of the in a hypothetical, in a hypothetical that were working with elements of the government to subvert the proper response to what was known to be a potential protest on January 6th that could breach the grounds of the Capitol. Furthermore, we saw where Capitol Police held open grates and invited people to come in and said, no problem, come on in.
That came out in trial and was
come
debunked.
on in. So my point is there's some suggestion, and I realize you're sort of not aware of this.
You focus on the 6,000 that they're asking for the names of. What are they,
but Anthony,
in
what
your
I'm saying
theory,
is,
has done wrong?
Talk about like the theory of discovery and transparency. That's what I'm saying. We want to know everything there is to know about January 6th. Everything there is to know.
Okay, all right.
Including the cops that were ordered to do this, go there. Who told you to go to Virginia, pull this guy out of his house in the middle of the night, shut down his firearms license, take away his hard drive? Who told you to do it?
Okay, hold on a quick second here. First of all, let's go back to the setup that I did so skillfully, I think, about how Donald Trump says we're going to get vengeance on the people that investigated me. Okay, these 6,000 people, in a way, did investigate him because he was the one who called this rally and they were there in his name, etc. But what I don't understand is when you say that there is a conspiracy or they're trying to figure out what happened, there is so much information. We've had 1,000 some odd trials and proceedings. There's information galore about what happened. And you have these 6,000 officers who in one form or another took an oath to tell us what happened on January 6th. They did it in a fact-finding that they do as their job. I'm asking you, are you rounding them up because you want to talk to them about what happened? You already know what happened. They've testified to what happened. Are you saying you want to find if one of them was involved in a conspiracy? I kind of think it's hard that conspiracy would not have become clear by now, that not one single officer would have stood up and said, hey, my 5,999 guys are on the tape.
So then I'm just trying to understand the implication then. Are you saying that the only reason that they're asking for the disclosure of the agents involved is inherently to leak it or whatever?
No, it's inherently to punish people for doing their job of investigating their cult leader. That's what I'm saying. They're trying to punish people who did their job because their job was to keep a criminal from committing more crimes. He got away with it, your guy.
Right.
No doubt about it.
So wait a minute.
But these 6,000 did their job.
So you're saying ipso facto, it's a defined and concluded matter that the only thing that happened wrong on January 6th was that Trump invited the people to go to the building.
No, over 1,000 some odd crimes.
And then all these other people
thousands
followed through on that and went into the grounds and broke windows.
Yes. They would not have been there if Donald Trump didn't call this rally. Ashley Babbitt wouldn't have been there if Donald Trump didn't go there and
you're
stop.
saying that there is no ongoing question as to why there weren't National Guard members deployed there ahead of time, or why there was paid informants in the crowd.
You want to have that? So you think that these 6,000 who worked on the case are being rounded up and their names are being turned over because someone at the Pam Bondi can't go to the FBI and say, I want everything you know about the National Guard presence. The information is present.
But so then I'm trying to understand, like, what you're saying that they,
I'm
if
saying
they
they're
have
being
the information,
rounded
they
up.
can get it.
I'm saying they're being rounded up to be punished. This is not a fact-finding job. There's no need to round up their names if you want.
Punished how?
To be fired or to be prosecuted.
But if they're being fired for doing something wrong outside the parameters of their job,
they're being fired for doing their job.
You're making that determination unilaterally about 6,000 people.
No, Donald Trump said during the campaign, we're going to get vengeance and prosecute those that investigated me. These are the people that investigated him by extension, in his crazy mind.
So, in other words, he has no right to know who those people were? He can't confront his accusers or whatever? I'm trying to follow along. I'm trying to follow along.
Okay, the accusers, and we have to wrap up this segment, but the accusers are not are the individual cases, the 1,500 some odd cases.
Yeah.
Those are the people that they had a chance to call these FBI agents, cross-examine them. The data is, the information's out there. Now you're saying the cops that investigated my people, that found them guilty and sent them to prison, I want all of them to be presented in my office. Why? He said during the campaign, it is for vengeance. Okay. I believe him.
So you're saying that because the agents responded, and I know we got to hit the break, because the agents were responding to these individuals who responded to whatever it was that happened on January 6th, that because they weren't okay.
Simple.
So the
I'll make it very simple as we go into the break.
Okay, fine.
Simple as we go into the break.
Yeah.
6,000 people were responsible for prosecuting Donald Trump's cult, and he wants to get even with those 6,000.
And I'm slapping your hand for saying cult, and we'll take a break. He's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. When we come back, is the Trump family benefiting from some of the stuff that's going on here? Anthony thinks so after that. Welcome back to the left versus the right. I'm James Flippin. He's Anthony Weiner. And
by the way, is this 2 hours going to screw up the podcast anyway? Now it's a 2-hour podcast?
It's a long podcast.
I mean, amount of time you spend in the gym, it's probably not enough.
Yeah, right. Do
you ever go back and listen to your stuff?
I have at times. I find that like I'm totally over the concept of, this is an interesting question for you maybe, because you're not, like, I've had audio on tape for a while, like going back to like news stuff and podcast stuff and whatever. Do you still find it weird to hear your own voice like on tape?
No, but I tell you, I do find myself going back and listening because I'm not as on the air as much as you are. So very often throughout the week, I'm like, I have a podcast that comes out on Wednesday, The Middle Unplugged. It drops in the middle of the week. But very often I'm thinking like, all right, let me hold on to this little nugget. I want to say it on the radio, or I want to say it to James.
Okay.
And sometimes I'm like, did I use that material? And then another thing will happen. The doorman in my building is a big fan, mostly of Dominic, not of either of us. He will sometimes say, you were wrong about it. And I'm like, I don't remember saying that. Did I say that? And I want so badly to come the next time I'm walking Billy to walk by and say, I checked. I never said that.
That never happened.
And he's always right.
Yeah.
And so every once in a while I'll go back and check for that purpose.
Well, it is interesting just from a podcast perspective, and of course it's radio by any other name, but it's kind of on demand. I do feel as though a lot of people just hit pause on the podcast, and whenever they pick it back up is when they pick it back up. So if it's 3 different commutes it takes them to listen to it, what does it matter?
It's getting harder. During the campaign, it was kind of like every week was kind of the same.
Right.
We'd have outrages of the moment. It was kind of the same. Now, news is like sprinting. Like every day there's like another development and another thing. So,
yes. And we promised, we teased it, we will do it. I'm looking at Anthony's Mets sweatshirt right now.
You want to see the funny thing about this? I don't know
to
if you'll get this on YouTube. It's a sweater that says Mets, New York, and then in big letters it says baseball.
Because we needed that
clarification. Like, why did I need to be told that? If you are if your fandom does not even go to knowing what sport you're buying, then
and since tomorrow is Super Bowl Sunday, I'll just
we should do some sports before
we'll do some of that, and I'll note that my cousin, in a very similar fashion, always objects to when commentators surrounding the NFL say, and this man took the football and ran it down the football. Like, he's like, we know it's football.
Yeah, I have a little problem with that also. The other thing, and we do it here, we do it here too, in the New York Football Giants. Dude, I know it's not baseball. You don't need to tell me the score.
But that's tradition. It takes it back to the now San Francisco.
If you're going to be tradition, then call them the New Jersey Football Giants.
That is true. That is true. All right, so we have some stuff we want to get into here with Trump Jr. has signed a deal to be on the board of a healthcare company. Anthony's got some thoughts on that. I wanted to touch quickly on the concept of Sanctuary City again, as far as Pam Bondi.
Yeah. Did you have something else to add on the FBI?
I just wanted to say that the January 6th thing, okay, and at the risk of it spilling over totally over the show all over again, that it's not so much about accusing any individual person when you're in fact-finding mode. You know what I mean? Like, in other words, if there is something bad that happened on January 6th from some sort of conspiratorial perspective, which I personally think there was, you need to know all there is to know about it, including the agents that worked on it after the fact. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they were involved in the original impetus for what happened that day, which would potentially be problematic or criminal, but they may know some things that other people obviously wouldn't. Okay. So it's like a subpoena.
Yeah,
in that respect.
Let me take that at face value. First of all, a conspiracy that in a way involves a force of 6,000 some odd people, even if there's 5 people in that conspiracy, that conspiracy won't last very long. These are people in law enforcement. If they think one of their brothers is corrupt, or 10 of their brothers are corrupt, and they're trying to bring down the president with a fake thing, I don't believe that. If you believe a conspiracy happened,
I probably agree with you, but that's not really what I'm saying.
Okay, but you believe a conspiracy happened up above. It's like the institution, some brass, some FBI administrator, someone up top. Okay, in that case, if you want to engage in fact-finding, You don't need to round up the 6,000 anything. You now will have a head of the FBI. You've got a Justice Department. Why do you need to know the names of those people? The implication, and this is clearly the way the world is interpreting it, the implication is those 6,000 people were involved in something nefarious. And I just don't think that they were. Even if you want to take all of these debunked things that you keep returning to, why wasn't the National Guard called, or whatever, the National Guard, even if they had been called, ultimately, you still had the fundamental problem that people were being called there to be violent. And that's what they did.
Stop.
They brought weapons. They conspired to come. They brought armaments. They brought bear mace, and they committed these crimes. How do I know they committed these crimes? Because the people that did the investigations, professional investigators, did the fact-finding, looked at the video, something you apparently never did, did the investigation, went into a trial. The opponents, the defense bar, said, but the National Guard wasn't called. And the jury heard it. And the judge heard evidence about that. Oh, but Nancy Pelosi, but Donald Trump told me to be there. All these defenses, all of them came up in trial. The door was open. They invited me. It's almost as if you think that you thought of something that 1,500 defense lawyers didn't think of.
I certainly have not come up with any way to overcome
The criminal justice
a
system.
leftist Washington, D.C. judge completely stripping away Americans of their rights.
And
I
juries.
have not come up with that
And
a
grand
solution
juries.
to that. But no, let's just leave it at where it is. You're saying that these individual defenses kind of brought up aspects of January 6th that could be considered as weird or worthy of further investigation, and it didn't work for them in terms of getting out of prison or avoiding prosecution. So that means it's not true.
That's fact-finding.
That's certainly one way of looking at it.
That's how we fact-find in crimes. Yes,
Okay.
we did that.
But there is going to be, thank goodness, a larger investigation of what happened on January 6th. So quickly shifting gears here, and he's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin. This is The Left versus the Right. You wanted to talk about the recent news involving Donald Trump Jr.
Well, let's do Pam Bondi first, just for a quick moment of this, just as I want to touch this. One of the first things Pam Bondi, the new Attorney General, does when she gets into office, as she disbands the Office of Combating Foreign Influence in our government, in our elections. This was a huge problem in 2016. The Russians...
Was it? Was it really?
Yeah. You know who told me? Wait for it. Donald Trump's intelligence officers. They testified before Congress. Dan Coates, everyone else. They raised their hand.
What was the grand result of that whole investigation?
Well, the grand result was that Donald Trump got the help of the Russians becoming president in 2016. Well, that's all.
So you're just leaving out the nitty gritty of the fact that it was like getting 1,500 likes on a Facebook page.
That's not what happened. They were systematically trying. Listen, can I ask you, are you in favor of Russian interference in our elections?
No, I mean,
Of course not.
But
easy. It's an easy question.
What are you supposed to do? Like stop the ability for some Russian company to buy Facebook ads or something? I mean, again, you could try to geofence the ability to buy electronic ads.
Well, for one thing, the Justice Department should have people who are sitting at a desk all day trying to make sure it doesn't happen. Crazy idea, I know.
Yeah.
Shouldn't happen with the Chinese. We don't want that. That's the way espionage and foreign influence in elections is going on right now. If that's news to you, welcome to the world. Pam Bondi comes in and disbands that office. Why would anyone disband an office dedicated to stopping foreign influence? I have a theory. Let me know when you want to hear it.
Go ahead.
Their theory is they like foreign influence in elections because it helped them get elected.
In 2016 or in 2024?
Well, they were working for them in 16, 20, and 24. Donald Trump is the preferred candidate of Putin, according to
Not publicly. He said he wanted Kamala Harris to win.
Well, have you watched RT recently? They loving it. Oh, Tulsi Gabbard's our guy, RFK's our guy, Donald Trump's our guy, and now Pam Bondi's our guy.
Oh, is RFK accused of being
I don't really know. I assume. I mean,
Why not? Throw him in there,
the guy's
right?
on the wrong side of just about every issue. But the point I'm making is, if you believe, and it's common sense, it wasn't a hard question. We all got it. Even Eric perked up when I said it.
Eric was agreeing
Yeah,
with
he
you
was
on that.
nodding as
Yeah.
well. I can't
Yeah.
tell if he was nodding or just woke up.
Nodding off, yeah.
But the foreign influence in our elections, bad. People at the Justice Department who fight against it, good. But why we're going to eliminate that office? There's one obvious answer, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, and of course, I would agree with you in the sense of like, why would we want to have the son of a sitting president working on a oil and gas company in Ukraine, and then the president or vice president at the time saying, you better fire that prosecutor looking into my son or else you're not getting $1 million.
No, they weren't looking into the son. My God, you're screwing the story even more.
It was looking up into the company that he worked for.
He wasn't. Hold on. The prosecutor. Do you really not know the story, or are you just following the Jim Jordan Comey?
What are you
Comer
talking
thing?
about? Go ahead.
When the prosecutor that was in the entire European community and all of us, we all wanted that prosecutor out because he wasn't prosecuting. He was too close to these companies. We were trying to get someone tougher in there. Do you really not know that?
The guy that they wanted fired,
correct,
was looking into Burisma.
No, he was supposed to be. He was supposed to be the guy getting corruption out of the Ukrainian government and Ukrainian economy, except he himself was on the take. So the whole European community and our policy, Republican and Democrat alike, the Ukrainian caucus headed by Ron Johnson, said a letter, get rid of this prosecutor.
So your argument, the argument that you're making right now is that I'm wrong in suggesting otherwise, that President Biden wanted Burisma investigated, and that's why he was
well,
mad.
It wasn't Burisma.
This
guy, the prosecutor, this guy Shturkin or whatever his name is.
Whatever.
He's also a goalie for the Rangers. Who knew?
Yeah.
He was universally, according to the Western world, part of the problem.
I remember there being some sort of narrative surrounding that.
The European Union wanted him out. The Republicans in Congress wanted him. He was seen as part of the corruption in the government. So get rid of this inspector. And yes, that inspector was supposed to be looking into all kinds of things. We said, we're not giving you guys any more money unless you get rid of this guy. But then it wasn't quietly or secretly or conspiratorially. Biden did it out loud because that was his job, was to try to go to foreign countries and get them to be less corrupt.
But again, just to be clear, what you're saying is that Biden actually wanted Burisma investigated, and that's why he...
Well, Burisma at the time, and this was going on concurrently, was trying to clean up their act by showing that they're more transparent. But here's the part that's absolutely true, which will transition into our next subject. They hired Hunter Biden because his name was Biden.
Right.
Now, Biden was not the president at the time, he was the vice president.
But isn't that foreign influence in elections?
Not in elections. It was somewhat foreign influence in elections.
But I mean, ahead of time, after the time,
he wasn't lobbying.
It's buying influence.
No, influence peddling, I'm going to call it 100% sure. There's no evidence that he ever lobbied.
Hunter bribing, as we're saying.
Well, there was never any influence that he was involved in lobbying or anything else. He never had to register in the Foreign Lobbying Act or anything. He traded on his daddy's name, Biden.
Yeah, he was supposed to register with the Foreign Act, by the way. Well, he probably should have, and then there was that case involving California that kind of sort of traversed
There was this whole investigation that looked into it, and he was not charged with that crime. That was a pretty easy one. If he had a file and didn't, they pretty much had him dead to rights. Same way around lobbying restrictions, but they didn't have any evidence he lobbied anybody. Long story short, I've been saying this for years. Hunter Biden, scummy, trading on his dad's name. I mean, it's not a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
When Bush kids did it, it was scummy. When this RFK Jr. has done nothing in his entire life except trade on Bobby Kennedy's name, he does noun, verb, and Bobby Kennedy in every sentence. So all I'm saying is now that Donald Trump is back in. His son-in-law raised billions of dollars being in the Trump family. His daughter raised a bunch of money getting trademarks from China. And now look at this. Trump Jr. is which Trump is it, by the way?
It is Trump Jr.
Trump Jr. is making millions of dollars by going on and being on the board of a medical company that has business with the country.
I'm not trying to be purposefully knocking you off here, but is it disclosed what his salary is or compensation?
I don't even know if it is.
Okay.
The point
you said it. You said he's making millions.
Oh, I don't know. He's making money.
So he's not doing offhand comment.
No, he's not doing it for free. The point is he's getting wealthy doing it.
Okay.
I don't like it, but I'm not calling it the Trump crime family, and I don't hear where is the outrage about kids of the president working in the private sector.
Well, but wait a second. I don't think it actually is per se outrage about kids working in the private sector. And what's so fascinating is this, when you sent the email over first kind of laying out some potential topics, this is not the one that I thought you were going to pick a bone with.
Oh, because Lara going for Fox?
No, I thought we might actually potentially have some common ground a little bit with the Eric Trump thing.
What did he do?
So he tweeted about the desire to, I don't want to get ahead of myself.
No, but this is all in the category of family members enriching themselves. But
there's nothing wrong with, like, for example, Donald Trump Jr. was a successful businessman before President Trump became president.
Was he now?
Tell me how. If you're not watching the video,
tell me how.
Anthony's doing that sort of like leaning head,
I'm like, really
eyebrow
now?
raise.
I'm giving the really now look.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have the full story of his life in front of me.
He hasn't.
But I'm sure he was working in the private sector.
As Rodney Dangerfield would say, on the family tree, he was the sap.
That's a good line for Rodney Dangerfield. But no, Eric Trump tweeted out something along the lines of, is it time to add ETH, which I think is Ethereum cryptocurrency?
Yeah.
And, there's speculation that was he sort of touting it there and saying this is a good investment, or was he arguing that the strategic reserve would be benefited by adding some Ethereum to the portfolio in addition to just
knowing the Trump
Ripple
family, he had a finger in that pie.
Knowing you, it's not surprising that you would say that. And I'm trying to be fair and be a non-just MAGA Jim person here and say that I think you do have to be careful with some of that stuff. There's law out there that says if you're touting a cryptocurrency and it's because you're either being paid or I guess because of your investment position, you're supposed to disclose that. And of course, there's laws governing touting securities, and is a cryptocurrency a security that gets all.
Doesn't Melania have like a a meme coin where she's making money on transactions on meme coins?
I think that they do. Yeah.
Why? My only point is this. And this is going to be a theme the next year. Hypocrisy on the part of Republicans. Outraged about Hunter Biden. The Biden crime family because he was hired on the board of a energy company, or he did a real estate deal with a Chinese concern. Yeah, there are people who trade on names all the time. But you won't hear about it now. You won't hear Trump's crime family.
Well, you will, though. I mean, again, you'll hear about, well, maybe not crime family, because, again, you have to actually establish that there's something treasonous or wrong about being involved in a private company.
Okay, then apologize now to Hunter Biden. Because he was never found guilty of doing anything treasonous or wrong with a private company.
Biden and the connection to both China and Ukraine is something that I can't really put my finger on or easily define in the same way that I can Donald Trump Jr. working for a healthcare board in the United States.
What about healthcare that's supervised by HHS in his daddy's administration? That's even worse.
But it's a private entity.
Yes, that's what Hunter Biden was paid for. Private businesses.
But my point is, it's all the surrounding factors that you seem to be ignoring, like the fact that it's Ukraine, the most corrupt nation on earth, one of them.
You want me to come up with various things I can put into all of these things very easy. For example, the idea that these meme coins are being purchased by who? Oh, we don't know because it's anonymous. So it could be the Russians, it could be the Chinese, it could be the Saudis. We don't know.
Sure.
Yes, you can make things sound bad. Long story short, trading on daddy's name is the problem here, okay? And when you got rid of everything else, the Biden crime family was criminalizing private business deals that a family member of the president did.
But can I just sort of put a pin in this really quickly? What's the only thing that Hunter Biden was ever actually convicted of or
he was found guilty of filing a false report saying that he was not on drugs when he got a gun and not paying his taxes.
Right. So I guess maybe the taxes thing, you could argue, somehow connects to the selling of influence and money that he made or whatever.
No, he made a bunch of money, and if it was a drug addict, he didn't pay his taxes. And usually when that happens, someone calls you up and says, pay your taxes, you pay it back with a penalty, you go on your way.
Right. So for all the kind of, aspect of scrutiny you're raising surrounding the so-called Biden crime family, a term that I'm really enjoying you using, they've never actually faced any problem.
That's exactly right, because knuckleheads scream for the top of your lungs, but you didn't have anything
Then why did James Biden get a preemptive pardon?
Because you guys want to penalize Biden people for doing something, and you rounded up 6,000 FBI agents. But you're prosecuting people for just doing their job.
But by definition, you only pardon wrong. The word pardon means that someone did something wrong.
I am not crazy about preemptive pardons, but now that we see what Donald Trump is doing, which is doing vengeance.
And he's just going to create a crime out of thin air?
Yep.
Okay. That's a trick we haven't seen him pull off yet.
That's why they're asking for the name of 6,000 FBI agents. They're going to do it to them next.
If they create the new crime out of thin air of investigating January 6th, that's a new crime or something.
You guys, your team used to respect the law and the Constitution. You don't anymore. You picked a convicted felon. That proves it all.
Perfect transition to the concept of sanctuary city and sanctuary state and picking and choosing what laws. I know it's not here on the. Why are we going too long? Should we wrap it up?
This is break. Eric, what are you new in business? This means keep going. This means break.
I didn't see out of the corner of my eye. Fine. We'll kick Sanctuary City to the other side of the break. We also got to talk about Pete Alonso. We got to do some Super Bowl Sunday talk. And
we are going to do sports. I dressed appropriately.
Yes, you did. And maybe, if there's time, the executive order concerning plastic straws.
Oh, God.
James Flippin on the right, Anthony Weiner on the left. It's the left versus the right on 77 WABC. back to the left versus the right. He's Anthony Weiner. I'm James Flippin, and this is a new 2-hour version. You can still get Anthony's podcast, The Middle Unplugged, and listen to me doing news reports throughout the week. I'm always on with Crazy Curtis at noon.
And if you do listen to the podcast, the way we end these shows makes no sense.
You're talking about the kick to
we do. That we call it a
from
kick.
Staten Island?
No,
a throw?
We throw. Who's Frank? We throw to Vinny Medugno.
Oh, he's from Staten Island, too.
Who's Frank? Oh, Frank from Morano.
Our friend from Staten Island.
Oh, our friend. I think it said Frank, and it all made sense. No, the point
Frank is also from Staten Island.
And again, since I don't listen to the show on podcasts usually, when I do the throw at the end, rather clever throws to Vinny Medugno, if you're listening to the podcast, it makes no sense.
It probably doesn't, but at the same time, maybe this
we
is
don't
just me
care.
being
We're radio guys.
Well, see, that's the thing, and I am a radio guy.
You got to do good radio.
So it also kind of makes me think that if I was randomly listening to the podcast and I didn't know, I would think that was just some like fun random person you'd made up and were saying.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, it's we ran out of time. We're not going to be able to get President Trump on today.
What is it? It's like Mrs. Like they're. Back in the 50s, there was a radio guy who had this mysterious person that he would refer to off
Right,
scene.
right. Or like Rush Limbaugh with Snurdly. At the time, you never heard Snurdly. It was always just dead air, and he'd say, "What was that?"
Right. But, we also were informed during the break, the lawyers came down. If Salas says anything on mic, he gets in the union. So we had to make sure he doesn't.
He's got his union credits.
No, he hasn't said it. That's why when we gestured him, he can't gesture back.
He has to be totally mute.
Exactly. All right, let's go.
Okay, so Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice have sued the state of Illinois and the city of Chicago concerning Sanctuary City. We're going to have this congressional hearing.
What's Sanctuary City?
Sanctuary City refers to when the local police department, in essence, severs communication and interaction with federal immigration enforcement agents in a bid to insulate them from the issue of immigration, right? Like the argument is always that local cops want to be able to get witness statements and feel as though they're still protecting the members of the city, whether or not they're here legally or illegally from a migrant status perspective. And sanctuary is sometimes just kind of referred to in an overarching like political theory way. Sometimes it's actually codified.
How are you using it? How's Pam Bondi using it?
Does Chicago, maybe you know, and I'm actually admitting I don't know for sure, does the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois have a statute on the books like New York does? Saying
I imagine they have a statute or a policy, but it's a policy to not do a thing. It's not a policy to commit a crime. It's a policy. I think when people refer to Sanctuary City, and here's I'm quasi making a point, but I'm also trying to learn this, is that people use Sanctuary City as if to say, we are a city where you can come and do illegal activity and we're going to let you, right?
Well, in this context, very specifically, just the concept of illegally immigrating.
Well, but people use it all kinds of different ways. Sanctuary City means we give you a credit card and we give you a bed and we give you a job and we give you health care. We're a sanctuary city. And I just want for this show, for this moment, for us to kind of define what our terms. If what they're referring to in this is that when a city has a policy that police officers, when you go to roll call in the morning, you go out and you enforce Chicago law, you try to solve Chicago crimes, and you try to arrest people who violate those crimes. That's your job. And if the policy is you don't do other jobs, you don't do the job of immigration enforcement, you don't do the job of of trying to figure out who's supposed to be here and not supposed to be here, you do the job of arresting bad guys that commit crimes against residents of Chicago. If you think that that is a crime to do that, to have that posture, we're just going to enforce our own laws, we're not going to enforce federal laws, I don't really get it. That's probably true of every police department out there.
Well, the distinction here is what Pam Bondi's lawsuit and the Department of Justice lawsuits says, that these policies, and then specifically Chicago and Illinois, are interfering with federal immigration enforcement. So in other words, not just that they aren't actively participating in the enforcement of the law, but that they're actually stopping the federal authorities from being able to do it.
That's already against the law, right? And she's saying that someone is doing that. And so, okay, let's have a prosecution to see who she thinks should be prosecuted for that. I think it has become a bumper sticker for a much larger, more complicated question, which is, what should local authorities do when they're trying to go out into the community and solve crimes when they come across someone who's not documented? What should they do? Should they stop everything they're doing and say, wait a minute, this is a witness to a crime. He's not documented. I know this because I interviewed him about his documentation and his, even though it's not my job as a New York police officer, as a Chicago police officer to do that, I'm going to now, I've got to stop everything I do and arrest this guy? I mean, what is it that you're expecting? Remember, deportation proceedings, someone who's here undocumented and is to be deported is a civil problem. That goes before a civil court. Okay, we already have people that get arrested in Chicago, get arrested in New York, serve their time in prison. If you want to say when they're done with their time in prison, we want to make a phone call and say, hey, federal government, we're going to tell you right now that we have a...
Well, here's why it gets a little stickier than just the way you're laying it out, right? In terms of some of these jurisdictions, including Illinois, including New York, parts of California, there's a different standard of what it is to like hold a defendant and incarcerate them versus what might happen with a federal immigration agent, right? So if someone's accused of slugging somebody in the face, or let's connect it to the Lake and Riley thing, you know, stealing from a store or something like that. Here in New York City, not much is going to happen to you.
When you're
They're going to fill out some paperwork. Right.
Okay.
And you're arrested.
You haven't, but you haven't found guilty. You've just been accused of it. Okay, go ahead.
They're going to fill out some paperwork. You're going to have a court date that you're supposed to show up for. Maybe you'll have some sort of court monitor thing, whatever this, that, and then you go back out into the world because we don't
right. So far, you're just describing regular law enforcement.
Yeah,
but yes, go ahead.
Right. However, for federal immigration authorities, if you were to do something of a illegal nature and they got their hands on you, they might say, "Cool, you know what? You're accused of doing this, but we already know for a fact based off when you came in at Eagle Pass and we said you have to show up at this date and you didn't, even though you're claiming asylum and blah, 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 blah. You have to go. You're getting kicked out because you didn't follow the rules on the immigration side. So even though you're accused of stealing razors at CVS, Dwayne Reed, whatever, that one doesn't even have to get prosecuted because we already have you on this. And guess what? Get out. Bye. You already broke the law concerning immigration. So when you don't have that sort of cooperation between the federal side and the state local law enforcement side, it just creates more chaos around like what is and isn't happening here from the enforcement of laws.
Yeah, okay. So let's get back to the real world example that you just made. If someone is found guilty of a serious crime in New York, it pings in the federal system. The feds put in something called a detainer request, meaning when this guy's sentence is done.
And I'm not trying to split hairs, but you said if they're convicted.
Right.
Not necessarily if they're arrested, right?
Right. Not necessarily if they're arrested or accused of something like that. You don't go because then you're still innocent.
Right.
You're arrested, you're still innocent.
That's the stickiness here, is that we have a sort of like softer, more progressive way of treating crime.
Well, let me just make it pretty clear. What's been going on up to now, ICE doesn't have the authority to deport anybody. Courts deport people, right? And so if someone has a
But that's the enforcement arm of that.
Right, but what the person you're describing might not have a deportation order.
True,
and there's no problem if they do. If they have a deportation order.
If they did not show up for if it was a catch and release thing and they didn't show up for their
right. You see, this is the point I'm making: is the people who use Sanctuary City to get their imagination running wild about what's really going on. What's really going on is you have different categories of people who are undocumented. Most of the people getting thrown out now, moving to Guantanamo now, are people that are in a state prison system, that they've done their time, that justice has been served, and now they're getting thrown out of the country, and we need some place to send them. In the case of Venezuela, we don't have any place to send them, so we're putting them in Guantanamo or whatever the heck we're doing with them. A lot of people are held in ICE facilities. They go from a state prison. The feds say, we want them. They take them over in New York and Chicago and everywhere else. They take them over and bring them. That's 90% of the people that are now being kicked out by the president. They were kicked out under Biden. They were kicked out under Obama. It's the low-hanging fruit.
So what do you think, what's the main concern or the upside or the downside of either having or not having sanctuary cities laws?
That's
why
the
do
point.
you? Well, I'm asking you.
Here's the reason
Like,
why.
do you think that local beat cop is going to be looking into this, that, the other, and says, "Uh-oh,
No,
that guy's actually from Colombia. I better call my buddy at ICE."
That's actually part of the problem. So Rudy Giuliani put it best when he supported Sanctuary City. He says, we want our cops solving crimes, and that means sometimes talking to people who are suspicious about cops who don't want to talk because they're not documented.
Right.
We want the undocumented, for example, to put their kids in school, not to hide under a bridge because they're fearful of being thrown out.
Sure.
We are the city of New York. We got to figure out how to make our streets as safe as possible.
Yeah.
So we have this federal agency that has a different imperative. So they sometimes may go around looking for, let them do it.
The one thing I'll say that I think it could strike some level of a little bit of understanding and compromise potentially is sometimes like the terminology behind things
100%
is a big problem.
Sanctuary City is a boogeyman. That's the point I'm trying to make.
But not just that. It also tells something to the person that would potentially immigrate and choose where to migrate, right? In other words, if you have no intention of completing the federal immigration process and you really only want to come here and be illegal for various reasons that I'm not even going to try to define right now, where are you going to go?
People, I agree with you. City of New York has benefited enormously being a capital for people who want to come. 99.99999% want to make their lives better by working. That's what migration usually is. It's not they're coming here, I want to get a bed at a hotel or at Times Square. That's not generally. Now,
There's plenty of those guys too, let me tell you. Trust me.
I've listened, the evidence doesn't bear it out. Usually people are in
I've seen them. Okay, whatever, fine.
Look, that's a different conversation about New York and the rights you have when you're homeless in New York. But for the most part, yes, some localities have said it's in our interest to be seen as a place that's friendly for migrants to come because and some of those places, small dairy towns in Wisconsin, lean over backwards. The reason that a whole bunch of Uyghur Muslims live in Wisconsin is because that town said, we want to be welcoming because we need the workers.
One of the things that, and this is not even the same exact thing, but it's adjacent to it. One of the things that you and I agree on is that there has to be serious crackdown, probably even a more stringent one on employers who look to
but it's not just enforcement
through illegal.
We want, this is maybe, I don't know what your view is on this. We want migration. We want people to come here. Right now, you know what our immigration laws do? They lock people in rather than out. Right now, when people come seasonally to pick almonds, they're afraid to leave because they're afraid they won't be able to come back in. Have a normal, do you know?
Just to interject, I'm more interested in seeing, and you can take this as xenophobic as you want it or whatever, U.S. native-born and also people who actually are here legally, them getting jobs is more important to me than
the
others.
magnet that's being created that draw these people over here is by businesses that want to hire the labor.
Yeah. Well, there's
the jobs exist. And by the way, it's a conversation for a different time. It's the fentanyl thing also. You know, the president of Mexico says the same thing about fentanyl. You know, we have all these fentanyl labs and all this money, all this blood, because you have a problem with people consuming fentanyl in your country.
And that's certainly true.
Right? So and they say, what about all the guns that are coming down here?
Yeah.
Look, I think the marketplace, I'm a free market guy. The marketplace is expressing we need cheap labor. The laborers are going to find it.
Okay, so speaking of the marketplace, in the few minutes that we have remaining, Pete Alonso, he went out on the marketplace,
Yes.
couldn't quite get the payday,
Yes.
went up to Toronto. Maybe that was going to, but you're excited to see him come back?
I had a weird feeling Alonso was going to come back.
Me too.
Because there were more and more teams were making other plans, including the Mets. I mean, I guess Vientos is going to go back to third or whatever. Listen, I want to tell you something. I am not a salary cap guy.
Really?
Okay? I'm not.
Wow.
I believe in workers should be able to.
It's the IM. Isn't that funny? Like in real life, you'd love a salary cap. In the fake world of sports, I want one. And
you and I should both, as libertarians, let the marketplace work. If you're a bigger market, you got more money. That labor should go where labor can go. Look how well you're paid here in New York. You might not be paid so well on a radio station in Kansas City.
Yeah, well.
But listen, I am not a big salary cap guy, and I can tell you this. In the arms race, with the Los Angeles Dodgers doing what they're doing. And the other thing
Talk about foreign influence with Japan.
And you want to see something else. And it's usually, for those of us Met fans, we're usually watching the Yankees do this for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
Finally, it's us doing it.
And a guy who has proven that he can do it in New York. Yes, he maybe had a lot of pressure on him last year and didn't have quite as good a year, but Alonso's a guy. All right, not much time left. Your pick for the Super Bowl.
I really could care. I was saying to Jordan,
Because you're a Jets guy, right?
yeah, I was saying to Jordan by the transitive property. Buffalo was beaten by Kansas City. Buffalo beat the Jets. Therefore, if Kansas City wins, I can argue the Jets are the third best team in the league. I don't know.
Okay.
But I guess I'm fascinated by the idea that a three-peat would be kind of amazing.
And you know what? The best part about it is, no matter what, everybody wins. Because those dopey end racism signs are being pulled out of the end zone. Come on, Anthony, let's give it up for that.
Everyone really wins if they stick around for Vinny Medugno coming up next.